Good evening. My name is Anneliese Vance Sherman, and I'm a regional labor economist with the Employment Security Department. In my presentation, Working Through the Pandemic, I'll be looking specifically at the economy through the lens of the labor market over the past couple years. But before I dive right into the labor perspective, I want to address economics as a social science. Fundamentally, economics is all about people. It's a social science that addresses decision-making in a constrained environment. Of course, decisions do not occur in vacuums. Culture, social privilege, access to resources, and other conditions shape the decisions that individuals have available to them and affect outcomes for individuals, families, and communities within economic systems. I point this out because we're living in a moment where a lot of risk has been introduced. We're all familiar with this image, the COVID-19 cases in Skagit County, and it's a good reminder that we are still living in an environment that has a great deal of uncertainty that has shaped the economy over the past couple years. 2020 was an unprecedented year for all of us. Many of us quickly adapted to online conferencing as we worked from home. We supervised our children in their online schooling environments across the kitchen table while we handled shifting workloads in makeshift home offices. Of course, it's important to also remember that many people did not have the luxury of working from home. From a labor market perspective, the next 3 slides show what unprecedented looks like in my line of work. So this first slide looks at the unemployment rate going back to 1948, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what we can see in this image is that the unemployment rate, while it does fluctuate over time, seldom reaches 2 digits. Yet, as of April 2020, the unemployment rate nationally reached 14.7%. Locally in Skagit County, we were higher than that. We reached 19.6% that same month. But I'll also point out another unprecedented phenomenon. Immediately following that increase in the unemployment rate came down very rapidly, and the most recent reading was 3.9%. In Skagit County, it was 4.4%, very similar to what we've been seeing nationally. Another metric that is unprecedented is the unemployment insurance claims. This goes back to 1967, and we can see that this is nothing like what we've ever experienced before. In April alone, April 2020, more than 18 million Americans applied for unemployment insurance. Similar story when we look at Washington State and Skagit County, where in Skagit County we had almost 9,000 claims in April 2020. In the meantime, similar to the unemployment rate, we saw the number of unemployment insurance claims come down rapidly and significantly. And at this point, the numbers are no different than what we saw prior to the pandemic. The most recent reading in Skagit County was 642, for an example. And third, the number of jobs in the US economy. This graph goes back to 1939, and you can see when you look at the graph where the recessions and recoveries occurred. It looks like a gentle wave-like pattern until you reach 2020, which is something completely and utterly different. The drop from February 2020 to April brought the economy back to about where we were in 2013. In Skagit County, we lost 7,600 jobs during that drop, nearly a 14% decrease, bringing us similarly to the state, down state and nation, about 13-14%. Again, I'll also point out 2021, another remarkable year, and we are on track to recover the number of jobs lost in 2022. So 2021 was also a remarkable year. I could, I suppose, just end right there and point out that those 3 slides showed crisis and a rapid recovery, and that's it. But of course, we all know it's a lot more complicated than that. If we recall back to high school physics, we learned Newton's 3rd law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I think in retrospect, it's hardly surprising that the magnitude of disruption presented in 2020 would lead to an unprecedented 2021. So it's not just a story about recovery, but at this point, let's look at what that recovery looks like. Notably, we've been talking and hearing about the question about a labor shortage and what is truly informing that labor shortage. I outline in a few different data points that we have available to us what we're seeing. So first, the labor supply is still constrained. Now, this is really unusual. During most recessions, we see the demand for goods and services decline, and therefore we see the demand for labor decline. But the supply of labor isn't necessarily impacted. This time around with COVID-19, not only was demand for labor impacted, the supply of labor was also impacted for a number of reasons, ranging from individual health concerns, family and community health concerns, challenges with childcare, and risk and retirement, a number of different situations that affected individuals and their risk assessment of the situation came into play, and our labor force has not fully returned. Second, unemployment rates are low. Now, unemployment refers to the portion of active job seekers that there are in the labor force. When we have a low unemployment rate, what this signals is that, for the most part, job seekers are successfully connecting with employers. When we're in this 3 to 4% range, that's the story that's being told. This places workers in a relative position of power. That is, employers are competing with other employers to attract and retain a scarce workforce. Until barriers to workforce entry are removed and the labor force expands, the unemployment rate will likely remain low. What this means for employers is that they are facing the challenges of ramping up their workforce after a recession without the benefit of a high unemployment rate. Job openings are much higher than usual. We are seeing this locally as well as nationally. We know part of this is just the result of physics. We had that steep drop in the number of jobs, and now employers are making up lost ground. We've got a tremendous amount of demand for goods and services, resulting in high demand for labor. There's an unprecedented number of job openings in today's economy. Layoff activity is lower than usual. For the most part, I suppose layoffs have already occurred, but we are seeing that most employers are not actively laying off the workforce that they currently have. Wage growth is happening. We are seeing wages rising at all wage levels. Of course, part of this is an artifact of 2020. The largest number of jobs that were lost at the lower wage levels, pushing up the average. But we are seeing wage growth happening in real time. Again, this fits in with everything else. The workers currently are in a position of relative power, which we see during times of low unemployment, pushing wages up. And yes, if you've been paying any attention to the local media or you have a business yourself, you know that people are quitting their jobs, and they are quitting their jobs in record numbers. Fundamentally, when we're looking at quits rates, it's an optimistic number. People don't tend to quit their jobs when they're feeling uneasy about the economy or when the unemployment rate is high. All of the conditions right now are ideal for employees that are considering quitting. The unemployment rate is low. Employers are looking for workers to fill their unusually large number of job openings. Wages are on the rise, and competition with other workers is lower than usual as long as would-be job seekers continue to sit outside of the labor market. So looking ahead into 2022, these are some of the things I'm going to be watching. First, it's important to acknowledge the pandemic is still with us, and I don't want to lose sight of the disruptive potential and uncertainty that remains. We are on track to recover the number of jobs that were lost in the pandemic. The Economic and Revenue Forecast Council expects that to happen this year, and for the unemployment rate to remain low. Labor force participation may continue to be a challenge. We've been seeing labor force participation declining since the 1990s. So the long-term trend is one of declining labor force participation, amplified by conditions brought on by the pandemic. However, if we look at some of the other indicators, we do know that a lot of recovery is happening. I'm hopeful for an inclusive recovery. And finally, technology. Technology has changed and will continue to shape the workforce as we move forward. The nature and expectations have also shifted along with technology, with the ability to work from home and Most industries have been impacted one way or another, including shifting to online services and curbside delivery. A lot of different technological changes have happened and will continue to change. Technology could slow job growth for some types of work. This isn't a new thing, but it's also going to open up opportunities for many. One of the challenges that we're going to need to confront is how to ensure that this does not create large barriers to employment for a lot of people who were left out. In closing, the labor market is in the midst of the largest disruption most of us have ever experienced. A number of different factors weave together to reveal nuanced situations that are challenging and present a lot of opportunities. I'm encouraged by the resilience and innovation present in the moment, and I'm hopeful that that as a community we don't lose sight of the basis of economics, people, as we move forward towards an inclusive and innovative recovery.